And I mean, to go back to that primal instinct then, that's fight or flight.
Yeah.
Anger, stress. All of those are natural states, as I said at the beginning. But they're triggered by, and most addicts will say the same thing. There's no conscious mechanism there. It's time to think.
Yeah.
This is stupid. It stops now. And I was able to do it in willpower. 15 years later, I fell off it.
Yeah.
And went straight back to it. Yeah. This is when PTSD is a classic. PTSD is a highly volatile, negative response to is the one that takes them over the edge.
Yeah.
But it's no good dealing with the one that takes them over the edge if you haven't dealt with what got them to the edge in the first place.
So thank you for coming on today, Jerry. This would be fantastic for you to take the time to come and talk to me. Would you like to introduce yourself and exactly what you do?
Yeah, okay. I'm Jerry Steinhauer. I'm an NLP master practitioner, and for those who don't know what that means, it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
Yeah.
And to put it bluntly, what I do is I deal with the internal shit that slows people down. All the stuff in the unconscious that causes people to, should we say, make some naff decisions. And it feeds into all sorts of problems.
I can imagine. So with the NLP, how does it benefit people with their personal and professional lives, as an example?
Well, it clarifies their thinking. It stops them from making those naff decisions. It stops them from getting into things like depression, anxiety, stress. All of these are they're natural states anyway. They're negative, but they're natural. But the problem is that a lot of them are rooted in our primal ancestors.
Yeah.
Anxiety, stress, fear, anger, all of those are out there. But we first encountered them when we were still on the lunchtime menu. Yeah. Wandering around the Serengeti plains with a pointy stick. And, back then it was the difference between being eaten and not being eaten. You versus a saber-toothed tiger, even with the pointy stick, who's going to win?
Well, yeah, the saber-tooth.
Yeah. So that's when all of the sort of social graces and everything started to come into play as well. Things like grouping together. 20 of you with pointy sticks, saber-toothed tiger, you were eating.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where things like social inclusion and exclusion started to come in. You didn't want to be excluded from the group because that put you straight back on the lunch menu.
And it's surprising how much of what you see today, which has been exacerbated by social media, but is actually a very primitive way of being, and all it's doing is shining a light on what we're really capable of in the primitive sense.
Absolutely. You look at all of the genocides and things like that. It doesn't take very much for people to go back to that way of thinking and that way of behaving.
Because it pretty much is our natural state. And for us to do this today and converse and everything takes a lot of forethought and mental capacity for us to do. Absolutely. And we've got to do it very well every day. But when shit hits a fan, so to speak, we instantly, and you see that a lot with the news where there's been hurricanes or anything like that, and then all of a sudden there's looting and there's rioting, and it's really interesting to see how quick we've gone from being really civilized to flipping back.
There's a book that first got me thinking about this, or thinking along these lines, donkeys years ago. William Golding's Lord of the Flies.
Yes. I always reference that when I'm saying something. I go, here we go.
Yeah.
But it's true.
It just exemplifies it. And it's look at football hooligans.
Yeah.
You know, they're stockbrokers or whatever. Some of them in London.
Yeah.
During the week, at the weekends, they're absolute thugs.
And it's mental in the sense of that you would think that these people are the type of people that you're doing business with on a professional capacity, that are undertaking, you know, highly functional people. But then when you've got something like the football, it's mad to see how quick that shift is. And it's almost like it's a want as well. It's like a thriving.
Yeah. And I mean, to go back to that primal instinct then, you know, that's fight or flight.
Yeah.
You know, anger, stress. All of those are natural states, as I said at the beginning. But they're triggered by whatever the triggering mechanism is. You know, saber-toothed tiger coming around the corner, that's a sort of an oh shit moment.
Yeah. I'd shit myself,
yeah. But nowadays we're getting that oh shit moment from being called in by the boss.
Yeah. Simpler stuff.
Yeah. And it's not a relevant response.
No, and do you think that is partly down to abundance? So like we don't need to worry about food. We don't need to worry about shelter. Well, most of us don't.
Yeah.
Do you think that because we no longer want or need in those things, that when you move up the hierarchical scale?
I think the problem is that our unconscious mind is still hardwired.
Yeah.
In that sense. We're still predisposed towards those responses. And so it's using them in circumstances where they're not merited.
And it's almost like you're living with a dual functioning brain, like a dual personality, one which is very primal and one which is sitting on top. It's almost like the Hulk.
Yeah, it is.
That is the manifestation of it.
Yeah. And, you know, clients that I've dealt with over the years, you know, don't give any secrets away, but one guy that I'm working with, let's just say, if he ever met Keith Richards, he could teach Keith Richards a few things about drug taking, and Ozzy Osbourne and all the others. You know, he's been on the hard stuff for over 40 years, and his habit is phenomenal, or was. And you know, his was triggered by being abused at the age of 9. Okay, and that was the catalyst for him going completely off the rails and staying off the rails for over 40 years.
That's a long portion of someone's life.
A very long portion of someone's life. I'm now working with him to undo all the conditioning that his unconscious has put into him. And that's the problem. You know, you talk to addicts, you talk about addicts, and most addicts will say the same thing. There's no conscious mechanism there.
Yeah.
It's time for a drink.
It's habitual.
Yeah, just get it. And it's an internal compulsion. And these are all strategies set up by the unconscious. And there's a new thinking coming around in psychological circles at now, where they're saying that addicts are not medical problems. They're not. They don't have mental problems. What the addiction actually is compensation for something that they're lacking.
Yeah.
And that is very much borne out by the work I've done with addicts.
My mother was saying a while back she suffers with a few illnesses, but she never could understand an addict in her mind at that time. But then with some of the tablets that she was on, the doctor had to wean it off because they were no good for her. I think they classed that as like a dirty drug. I can't remember what the one was. She said the withdrawal symptoms were horrific.
Mm.
And she said, I've never ever felt more compassion for a drug addict who's have to do this themselves and go through that, because she said it's horrific.
Yeah.
And that's just medication that is prescribed
I know.
by a doctor, let alone the trauma that other people face that leads them to alcohol. And
Yeah. Well, I've got to hold my hand up. I spent over 20 years as, let's just say, as a very, very heavy drinker. I drank 7 days a week to excess.
Yeah.
But I was high functioning. I was able to function during the day. But I'd go out at lunchtime, have 2, 3, 4, 5 pints, go back, then leave. And I was training sort of 5 days a week, but then it'd be straight into the bar.
Because it's a normal thing. It doesn't be, there's no line that, well, it's not a line, but there's nothing that differentiates yourself that this isn't normal.
Exactly. For me, it was normal. And for me, it was, this is why I relate very heavily with people who have a drug problem or a gambling problem or any kind of addiction, alcohol, because I've been there. I know exactly how it works, and it's that compulsion. There's no other way of putting it. It's not a conscious thought process. George Best, classic case. There was the classic interview. George, where did it all go wrong? And it's because he had that internal drive that was saying, you need another drink.
Yeah, I think I was watching The West Wing a while back with my wife, and one of the guys that's in there, he's an alcoholic, and he was just saying, it's not a case of me just having one. I can't stop at one. He said, I want to go to oblivion. And it's mad. And you look at the person and you think, he's a high functioning person. He has a very large responsibility. And sometimes you look at that and you go, it doesn't compute to me, because face value, you look okay. But under the surface...
A friend of mine, hockey playing friend, because I've played hockey all my life. And I was in my mid-40s. And he looked at me one day, he said, do you know what? You're the fittest physical wreck I've ever met.
Which is a nice compliment, but
backhanded, yeah.
Backhanded.
Yeah. And it was because, I was still outrunning people. I've never lost the ability to run.
Because you always associate, when you are having alcohol or drug addiction, that the natural outcome would be that you shouldn't be able to function, or you shouldn't be able to do these things, because that is the precedent of being an alcoholic.
For me, I've smoked since I was 9. I started drinking around about the age of 13. I started smoking weed and stuff around about the age of 15. And I didn't stop drinking until I was 44. Because one morning I woke up and thought, what are you doing? And I stopped. And it was a conscious decision at that point.
Yeah.
I said, this is stupid. It stops now. And I was able to do it in willpower. 15 years later, I fell off it.
Yeah.
And went straight back to it. And then my mentor, Bridget, she basically found out I was in trouble, or she came to understand that I was, because I was in black depression, back on the booze.
Yeah.
And she just said, stupid boy, come and see me. So I did.
It's like a mother saying it.
Yeah. And what she did was, it was almost like a Christmas miracle. She suddenly took me out of that dark place, that black tunnel that I was in, and showed me the daylight again. Sort of took away the blinkers. You know, it's rather like being a racehorse. You know why they put blinkers on racehorses?
Yeah.
So they can't see anything around there because they can't get distracted by it.
Yeah. They just focus on the end.
Yeah.
The line.
Yeah.
And is that what drew you to NLP then?
That's what drew me to it, yeah. Because at the end of it, when she got me to be able to see this, dear God, look at everything I've been missing. She got me to see that, and I just said to her, "You got to show me how to do this."
Yeah.
You know, then the various things got in the way, and it took me about 3 years to get around to it. But when she did show me how it worked, that clarified the understanding, and that gave me an understanding of the panoramic view that she'd given me.
Mm. What was that feeling like when, because now you can look back on how you was back then and that shift. What is that feeling like? Like you said,
It's euphoria. And that's what I give other people. Going back to the guy I was talking about, you know, he's been clean now for over a year.
Fantastic.
Not due to me. I'm working with him to deal with the stuff that's still in there.
Yeah. The
stuff that's keeping him at almost a sort of 9-year-old state. And I've been working with him recently to actually get him to love himself.
Yeah.
And we did that a couple of nights ago. And he was, all of a sudden, there's this blossoming. It's just fabulous to behold. And he just suddenly started to well up. And he was just saying, I've never felt this before.
Never knew that he could feel it?
Never knew he could feel it. Because he consciously, and this is one of the few conscious actions he did take, he had consciously prevented himself from loving anyone and from loving himself because he didn't feel worthy, and he'd been trying to kill himself for about 5 years. You know, the doctor 5 years ago said, "You've got 6 months left."
Really?
You know, I don't know how the hell you've survived this long. And you know, he didn't, his thinking was that he didn't want people to have any feelings for him because he didn't want them to be hurt when he did manage to kill himself.
Yeah.
And equally, the reverse side of that was he didn't want to have any feelings for them because that would have caused them to have feelings for him. And by not loving himself, he was able to shut down those feelings altogether.
But that's a vicious cycle that you have to consciously do every day to actively...
Yeah. Well, what you do is you undo that unconscious conditioning. Because that's all it is. It's a conditioning process. You know, the unconscious builds up. I'll give you a very simple analogy. I don't know what you're like when you get angry. Doesn't really matter. But when you get white hot angry, it's not a conscious response.
No.
It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that has been sort of soldered into your unconscious by your unconscious, because it's decided that this is how you need to react in certain situations. And those situations will have a set of trigger parameters. Once those parameters are reached, you have no control. It just happens.
Yeah, I definitely know where mine are.
Yeah.
But I know where this the point of why I've flipped. So usually I get stressed for a while. Either way, it's voluntary stress, like with the business, doing too much, but there's that level of stress. And it's always been that I found that when someone has bad manners or is try to kind of teach you like to suck eggs.
Yeah.
That is my spike.
Yeah. But there'll be a set of minor parameters to build up to that.
Oh yeah, this was like a week or two in advance, so I could feel the stress building up, but I kept saying to myself, I might need to take a week off, because I could feel, usually I can control how I respond to silly people, but I know that I'm at that point where it's slowly rising.
Yeah.
And it's like those scenes you see like in where the boat goes under, and then the two people are, and they're just there and they're sipping on to the last bit of until they
go down.
Yeah. And that's where I feel my patience levels. I usually got a lot more.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's less and it's less until,
I know it's weird.
Yeah.
But it's natural. Think about. Let's use fear as an analogy. Now, the first time you feel fear, your unconscious is going, what am I supposed to do here?
Mm.
And it's running around looking for a handbook. There isn't one.
Yeah.
Where's the user manual? There isn't one. You have to make something up. So it dips into the primal instincts and stuff. The stuff it's preconditioned with.
Yeah.
And let's say, for argument's sake, the logical first time that most people feel fear is going to be being born.
Yeah.
Just think of it logically. There you are, floating around, bit of doggy paddle. All your needs are being met.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get a bit restless, so you kick out a bit and get complaints. Complaints from the neighbours. But everything's serene, isn't it?
Yes.
And then suddenly you're tipped upside down and you start going down this black death slide. Well, it might as well be.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going on.
No, that's very true now.
And you're being pummeled on the way down.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, everything's as it should be. If you're not, you got this cord wrapped around your neck as well.
Yeah.
And your unconscious is going, what do I do? What do I do? So it says, do this, whatever this is.
Yeah.
And so you do. So you start. You come out, and what happens? What's all this? What's all this stuff?
Yeah, it must be an alien experience.
Yeah.
For 1 minute to be darkness.
What are these things that are moving around? Doctors and nurses and what have you. And it's just it is traumatic. An alien experience, traumatic. But your unconscious does something. Okay, it does something. It pulls something out of its bag of tricks and says, "This is how you respond." So let's say your response is to curl up, wave your arms, kick your legs, and scream.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next time that it feels feels it's in the same situation, it says, "Do it again."
Does it get there faster because it's learned how to do it?
Yeah.
The first time. So it's almost like one of those things where you get a skill set. The first time you do it, you crap, and then you get better and better because the repetition's there.
Yeah. But also that skill set gets changed.
Mm.
Now going to anger, anger is a better analogy for this bit. So the first time you react to anger, let's say you're 2 weeks old, you're there in the little nappy and the stupid little hat they always put babies on, or put on babies, and in the romper suit the 3 sizes too big because you're going to grow into it, and food supply's late.
Yeah.
And you're hungry, and this is the first time you've ever been hungry. Your body is now reacting differently, and again your unconscious is running around saying, "Where's the manual? What's it say in the manual? There isn't one." So do something. So it says, okay, lie on your back, kick your legs, wave your arms in the air, scream, go red in the face. So you do. And what happens? The boob arrives. Yeah. The milk supply arrives. Good. That worked. Next time it feels the the same situation, the same feelings, do the same again.
Yeah.
And this time, you don't get fed. You get your nappy changed.
Yeah.
What's going on now?
It's not what I was expecting.
Not what I was expecting at all. So it then changes it the next time it happens. It starts to be able to differentiate a little bit.
Right.
Says, okay, you're hungry, scream. Your nappy needs changing, it's burning, scream. But scream a different way.
Right.
Yeah. By the time you're 12, you're not lying on your back in the middle of Sainsbury's or Tesco's.
You'd be concerned.
Yeah.
But
because you haven't been fed. Because you know you won't get what you want.
Yeah.
So your response will have changed. But there's a connection. There's the first event, and the first event is the template for everything that follows.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like building a business process.
Yes. You've just evolved with it over time.
You evolve. Yeah. But it's still connected to the first time you've encountered it. So what NLP allows me to do is to take people back to that first event. Look at what was done, get the unconscious to review what it did, and 9 times out of 10, the unconscious looks at it and goes, oh shit, didn't mean that. And it learns from it. Having learned from it, you can then get it to apply that to all of the events up to now. And it changes the way in which it responds.
It's more like a cascading event that filters naturally, as opposed to trying to go from the end where you are at 12 and work your way back through all that mess. It's easier to go back.
Just go back to the root.
Go back to the start and let it naturally.
Yeah, because if you don't deal with the root, then those conditions are still in there. It doesn't matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to prevent the triggers all the time.
And that must be, is that highly successful then with the people that you work with then?
Yeah. Once you identify the root, then basically what you've done is you've undone whatever the problem is.
Yeah.
So, you're moving on to a situation where, let's go back to anger. Now your unconscious is going to say, okay, you're angry. What do you want to do? Here are your options. Instead of, no options, just do that.
And it's one of those things that when you have a discussion like this and you look back and you think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like with gardeners, they don't attack the leaves. If they want to get rid of something, they go for the root.
Yeah.
But in everyday life, you never do that, do you?
No.
You only do like the last interaction that you had, or it must have been because of that.
Yeah. This is when PTSD is a classic. PTSD is a highly volatile, negative response to a situation, whatever the situation is. It's highly traumatic, and that negative response to it is highly traumatic. And what actually happens is that the event itself and the response are wedded. Okay, so you think about that event and you're pulled back into that negativity and you start to relive it.
And is that why they have those, and they call it the flashbacks? But it's almost, to me, it's not a flashback because it seems like it's a living memory.
It is a living memory. Yeah, you actually relive it.
In the current day that I was born.
Yeah.
On the day that the stimulus happened, that traumatic event.
Yeah. Going back to, I almost said his name. Not going to do that. The
gentleman.
Yeah, the gentleman with the drug problem. He was, when he thought about the triggering episodes, the abuse and everything else, but they were just symptoms. They were the catalyst for him going onto the drugs. But the actual roots were much further back.
Yeah.
It was the responses to other things that cascaded together and accumulated and then gave him how to respond to the abuse. So it was undoing all the stuff back prior to that had to be undone, before then tackling how the response to the abuse had been dealt with. And once we got to that point, we were able to dissociate the emotions, the emotive states, from the event. And once you've done that, it becomes just another event. You can look at it and not be triggered by it.
So these events, because with the way that I'm seeing this in my mind, is that you have the event origin, and then it spreads like a root.
It's like a virus.
But conversely, with what I'm just thinking, that I'm just trying to understand now, that is sometimes it's not one event that does this, that it perhaps could be 3 or 4, and they converge into a semblance of like the Big Bang, the massive event.
Yeah.
And then that's where, so it could be that a person's dealing with multiple things and it's all come together.
Yeah. And the Big Bang
is
the one that takes them over the edge.
Yeah.
But it's no good dealing with the one that takes them over the edge if you haven't dealt with what got them to the edge in the first place.
It's because sometimes my mind goes off and it just starts thinking about all the different things like that perhaps I've seen in my life, and I think to myself, well, was it that, was it this? And it's probably a combination of a lot of things. And I think to myself, well, yeah, it might not be one isolated incident that I could put my finger on, so therefore I don't think that I have a problem, because it's no single point of failure that I go, oh, it must be that. But it could be micro points of failure over a period of years that have led to something.
Yeah, you've heard of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's exactly what it is. So as these things build up, it's like stress on an aircraft, on the aircraft's wings. Unless you keep on top of it, stress will cause those wings to drop off eventually.
Yeah, and it's the same with the shuttles coming back into Earth. They got to worry about not the big cracks, but it's the micro cracks.
Yeah,
that you can't see with the naked eye.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So what do you think, with all this being said, what do you think are like the misconceptions that you see when it comes to NLP?
You get two sides. You get the side of there are people out there who are fanatical about it, and they'll say, oh, it can do anything. It can in the right hands, but you're not going to read a manual on NLP and then go out and be able to use the techniques. You have to actually use them, and the way to use them is under some kind of supervision. You learn how to use them.
Yeah.
Because remember, you're dealing with somebody's unconscious. You're burrowing around in there. The
last you want to do is make a mistake yourself and exasperate any.
Yeah. So, it can do anything up to a point. I haven't yet reached anything that can't be solved, but I'm open to the experience. Because there are potentially going to be combinations out there that are so complex that you can't identify all the roots.
And it's okay to say that. It's to have the clarity in knowing that as well.
I mean, I've dealt with what is it called? It's dissociative disorder. I've had a client with that, which is basically short-term memory loss.
Oh.
They can't remember what they did the day before. The client I had is a barrister.
For black.
And doesn't practice at the moment because he can't remember what he did the day before.
And is there something that came up? Because obviously...
Bang. Just out of the blue. And he's a real struggle at the moment because I can't get him to recall.
Wow.
Now, some of what I've not managed to do with him has limited the problem, but it hasn't eliminated it because I still can't get him back to the sequence of events that led to that trigger point. I know what the trigger point is, or I know where the trigger point is, but I don't know what caused it. And he's not able to take me back
far enough
to be able to find it. So we're still exploring there.
Because I was going to ask about, like, when you're working with people, what is your approach to these sessions in doing it, when you first get introduced to a person?
First thing is always their life story. And I just ask them to talk.
Yeah.
I don't want to write it down. I don't want it scripted. I just want them to talk and allow it to come out as it comes out. Because normally, by doing that, what they actually come up with is a whole sequence of flags pointing in different directions. And that just gives me a heads-up view of where the problems might be. And then you start with the major negative emotions and get rid of them. Because they're invariably not invalid, but the way that they've been applied. You have to remember when your unconscious first lays down anger, you're within the first 3 years of your life. It's no more intelligent than you are at that point. Yeah. Conversely, when you start talking to someone who's got anger issues, and you're talking to them when they're in the mid-30s, their level of intelligence is far higher. So is their unconscious. Yeah. So you take the unconscious back to that early point, and it looks at that and goes, shouldn't have done that. That wasn't a valid response.
And it recognizes it.
Well, often it's a response to external stimuli.
Yeah.
Right. So, give you an example. I've had clients who, when you take them back to that first time that they felt anger, they were feeling angry because their parents were having a massive row.
Yeah. So they were just witness to it.
And that triggered that anger response in them. And then when you take them back to that point, you think, well, yeah, but why should that limit how I respond to situations for the rest of my life?
It's mad how because obviously the conscious is saying, why would it do that? And then the primitive side is going, I can see that this is a negative thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and avoid a similar situation like that.
Yeah.
For myself in the future.
Yeah.
But because you're not conscious of it.
And a lot of the time, the unconscious does things, it represses things before the conscious gets any kind of inkling of it.
Is that like when you hear about repressed memories?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So it's almost like it's a protective mechanism to go, I know you're not going to like this, so I'm just going to
lock it away.
Hide it first.
Yeah.
And then you get little bits that might seep through.
Yeah. I'll give you another example. A lady I worked with who was an alcoholic, 20 odd years, but she was a vicious alcoholic. She had nobody she could turn to, because when she got drunk, she got vicious. And not necessarily physically, but in the way in which she treated people.
Sharp tongue,
acid tongue, very, very vindictive. And then she'd wake up, and when she was told about it, she'd feel contrite. But it's too late.
Yeah.
And I worked with her, and her trigger was fear. And the actual event that was the triggering event, her unconscious would not take me back to anything before 9 years of age.
Wow.
Just refused. Now, I can get most people's unconscious to take me back to the point of birth and earlier, because it has all those memories.
Yeah.
You know, if you ask your unconscious to catalogue all your memories and stack them all up, you'd have a room full.
Yeah.
But it knows where everything is because they put it there. Yeah,
it's like we say we forget, but we don't. We don't know how to access it.
We don't know how to access it. It's like going into the British Library in London. You know, whatever it is, 10 million books. And you're looking for one particular book. And the night before, some sod has come in and taken down all the signage. Just removed it all. Yeah. So how are you going to find that book?
I struggled to find the bloody scissors that was in the kitchen the other day.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah. but I completely get.
Yeah, it's easy. You ask the librarian.
Yes.
Because they'll know, because they got the computer systems. They'll know where all the books are. And your unconscious is the librarian for all of your memories. But to give you an illustration, pick a spot on that wall. Now really focus in on that spot. Notice how the rest of the wall's starting to grey out. Starting to fade out. Because your unconscious now has a point of focus. All right? But your unconscious is dealing with every single spot on that wall. Your focus is on that one spot. You can stop now because you'll go blind in a minute.
Yeah, I would probably end up finding Jesus or something on religion.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But just see my point there. You can focus in on one specific item, but your unconscious is dealing with everything.
Yeah, it's capturing the entire image.
Capturing the whole lot. And what it's doing is, over the years, with all of this experience that's built up, it's built up an internal map of reality for you. Okay, that map of reality is what it refers to when it tells you how to respond to something. Now, that map of reality isn't real.
No.
It's your unconscious's view of your world. And it's based on all the decisions it's made, most of them that you weren't aware of.
That's mad to think that, you know, when you think about it, because it's almost like you are talking about two people that coexist within your body to protect each other.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis, the conscious you is navigating life.
Yeah.
And whilst you're navigating life, there's another person, like a sentry, who's on guard for you.
Yeah.
Is observing everything.
And it's saying, you need to deal with that. And it's giving you responses to deal with it. It's allowing you to get on with your day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's not interfering.
But when it feels it needs to, it will.
And you don't have a control over that.
You don't have a control over it.
That's...
Yeah, it's fairly mind-blowing, and you know, there are lots of techniques in NLP that can deal with specifics. Things like there's a technique that I use for people with PTSD.
Yeah.
And what it becomes complex if I try to explain it, but in simple terms, I get them to look at the actual event in real speed.
Right, okay.
Black and white, so it takes away the color, which diminishes a lot of the impact.
Right, okay.
Yeah. But then once they've looked at it and they are precondition it, pre-frame it, so they're starting before the event, so they're still safe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't finish until after the event is concluded and they're back to being safe. So you pre-frame it, get them to run through it in black and white, then clear the screen and get them then to run it backwards, but now in color and at multiple times the speed. So it makes it feel jerky and disjointed, and you keep on doing that and keep increasing the speed. And basically what that does is it undoes all of its connections with reality.
Yeah, because you're almost becoming an observer.
And
So
you are an
rather-
observer.
So rather than being the star in the action film, it's like then going, I'm going to put that on, I was going to say Netflix or a streaming platform, for instance.
Yeah.
And rather than just being in it, you're actually observing
You're
it
watching
from a
it.
different lens. So there's not a
Yeah.
disassociative perspective, but you don't have the same feelings towards it because you're looking at it going, okay, I wonder why I did that. Why would I
Yeah.
have done that? Rather than going, that was fucking awful, or I'm feeling fearful.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you another example. Close your eyes for a second. I want you to bring up a picture for me. Okay, the picture I want is the first front door you can remember. Bring it up now.
Yeah.
Right. Now I want you to tell me how old you are looking at that picture.
Great.
Right. So I want your unconscious now to allow you to float up above. Just allow you to float up above this scene now, and take you back to wherever that picture is and put you down in front of it, in front of that door. Okay. Now, I want you to notice something. All of a sudden, that door has become much larger because you're now 8 years of age and you're looking up at it. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now tell me what emotions you're feeling standing in front of that door.
Safe.
Safe. Anything else?
Welcoming. The first is the first house in Glenside, and there are a few steps to get to the door, and I can't remember the exact colour of the door, but I remember it had like the overhang, and you had the two poles to support it and everything. And my mother used to be in the garden sometimes, and I had loads of friends.
This is all conscious now. When you're talking like that, that's all your conscious. I can't remember the colour of the door. That's your conscious mind saying, I can't remember. Your unconscious knows exactly what the colour was. So now tell me what the colour was. What's the first colour that came into your mind?
The first colour was green. I don't remember, but I'm colourblind, so it could have been a green or a brown.
Yeah.
But I definitely know, yeah.
The first colour that came to your mind is green. And that will have been what your unconscious told you.
Right, okay.
Then your conscious starts to try and control it and starts to think, hang on a sec, colourblind, all of this stuff starts to kick in. Right? So now, thinking of the emotions that you're feeling, standing in front of it, I want you to think about a bonfire. You know, the closer you get to a bonfire, the more you feel the heat.
Yeah.
The further away you are, the less you feel it, until you get far enough away and you can't feel it at all. Now, these emotions act the same way. So what I want you to do is slowly allow yourself to rise up above that image of that front door and tell me when you can't feel those emotions anymore.
No.
Okay. So you're looking down on the door, but the emotions aren't there anymore because you're far enough away for them not to have an impact on you. Open your eyes.
Okay, I can adjust to the light for a second.
Yeah? Do you see what I've just done? That's brought out an image from your unconscious. Now, this wasn't pre-planned, was it?
No.
That was just random. Your unconscious is the gatekeeper to all those memories. And you didn't know it had that image in there because nobody's ever asked you about it.
No, and it's one of those things I even say to my mother and my sister is that I don't remember much of my childhood or past. I remember like the things that they've instilled in me and what have you. But my sister's got a fantastic memory, and she can recall stuff. Remember this, remember that. I'm just like, boo.
Yeah.
No, and it's always not plagued me, but I've always wondered, am I just bloody forgetful?
No, you're not. It's
But
just
it's still there. It's just
still
that
there. Yeah.
I've trained myself to switch off.
yeah.
more than
You just switched it off.
Yeah. I
Or
do
your
have
unconscious has.
Yes, I do have a nasty habit of switching off regularly.
Yeah.
It is, and whether that might indeed be a coping mechanism.
It could well be.
It is, because it's one of the things that I've never understood why I can do it so well. And it's also become a problem because it affects my memory. Because I know that I switch off, I then go, well, there's always going to be someone who's going to remind me. So if it's that important, they'll tell me again,
Yeah.
and I'll remember it. But if they don't, I'm crap.
Well, the thing is, that's your perception.
Mm.
The reality is, you have a perfect memory.
Yeah.
We all do. And the interesting thing is, you know, as I mentioned that you have your internal map of reality, as do I.
Yeah.
If you and I watched a TV program now, and at the end of the program we were asked about what we'd seen, we'd have very different views.
Yeah.
Because it would be played through that internal map. So our perceptions of that TV program are being filtered against that map.
That's really interesting, actually, because one of the things that you often see with crime programs and anything to do with witness testimony, and it's pretty much been proven that it's unreliable.
Yeah.
And is that grounded in the fact because everybody has a different perception of reality from the start?
Yeah, absolutely.
And our interpretation of events is different. So there's no absolute truth.
There's no absolute truth.
Oh, that's
There's no absolute truth. There's no such thing as perfection either.
No.
You know, if perfection existed, then none of us would be doing anything because we can't improve on what we have.
Exactly.
So what's the point of working?
My brain's just gone off because I love stuff like this where it really makes you think about how this plays into life and everything, and not just with drug addiction and alcohol. It triggers a lot of things with like people's buying habits and people spending everything.
Yeah.
Because a perception of reality is grounded in different values.
Yeah. Well, you go off and buy a pair of shoes. You decide you need a new pair of shoes. In your head, you've got an image already. Right? So what are you doing? You're going into the shops and you're looking at the shoes.
Yeah.
But unconsciously, your unconscious is filtering everything. So it's got, you know, you've got that image.
Yeah.
They've got to be brown. Okay, none of those are brown. Don't need any of those. So it'll lead you over there. There's the brown ones. Okay, you go to the brown ones, and then other filters will come in because you've probably set a budget.
Yes.
Yeah. So all of this filtering goes on all the time, but it's unconscious.
Yeah, you naturally and that's one of the things where you go out and then my son would go, "Oh, look at that, Dad, in that coat," and I'll look at it and I'll go, "Eh."
Yeah.
Because you like you said, you're just predisposed. It's not part of my criteria of what I need to be looking for.
Exactly. It's not part of your criteria, and a lot of the time it's not part of your criteria for life, for how you want to live your life.
And is that where you have then, you go into need, I'm going to make the assumption that you need different approaches to different clients when it comes to the NLP, because you have to understand their reality first, and is that why you go through that process?
You have to try and put yourself into their realities, try and see things from their perspective.
How do you remove your own objective? Because you have your own reality and you have your own, well, I say objective truth, but there is no objective truth. But you're going into it with your version of reality, trying to understand.
Yeah. So what I never do is try and play my perception of reality through their eyes. You know, it's all about suspending judgment.
Yeah.
And if I don't suspend judgment, then if I'm dealing with, for example, a paedophile, my own sense of values and things will come into play.
Yeah.
So I have to suspend it.
Yeah.
So I have to try and see things from that person's perspective.
To understand the root cause.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll end up clouding yourself and you'll never actually be willing to walk the path to get you to the point that...
Yeah. I've said for a long time, I'd love to get into someone like Hitler's head and find out what it was that turned him from a house painter in Austria to a megalomaniac trying to annihilate half of Europe.
And it's mad how that and the ambition to do that.
Yeah.
How they coexist.
And they do. They do. Your unconscious manages it very well.
Quite well. But that's obviously based on, and I'm slowly starting to understand why, is because his reality is it's almost like when they do a Marvel and the multiverse, and there's different worlds. His world is completely different to mine, even though we're sitting across from the sofa.
Yeah.
And that shift in perspective and those fundamental different realities, it's mad to think about.
There's an awful lot of stuff coming out of quantum physics and everything nowadays. And, you know, this is slightly off topic, but for me, when you start looking at the way that quantum physicists are starting to look at time and all the other stuff, you know, they're one of the latest theories that is coming around now is that there are millions of different timelines.
Yeah.
There are millions of different end states for a particular situation. Like the film Sliding Doors.
Yes.
Yeah. Or The Matrix.
Yeah. Gwyneth Paltrow. Is it Gwyneth Paltrow? Yeah.
Or The Matrix.
Yeah.
Are you going to take the blue pill or the red pill?
Yeah, the choice point.
Yeah. And that choice point. And what they're starting to come to now is that the universe itself is energy. I think they said now it's 99.9999% energy.
Yeah.
And 0.00001% is physical reality, physical matter. Well, if you apply that, that means that you and I are energy.
Is that why they keep saying that there's a theory now, and I know this is off topic, but we'll explore it a little bit, that people keep saying perhaps we're living in a simulation because of that, the energy, or is that, do you think that's a different...
It's... That one, we're living in a simulation. This is people trying to make sense of it.
It's another way of trying to find God.
Yeah. I don't try and make sense of it. I just take it as, okay, this is what we're dealing with. Now, what does that give us?
Yeah.
Where does that lead us?
Because even if you did know the answer, and then what?
And then what? Yeah.
Because people think that part then is just the end of what I've come to understand, but it's just like, well, okay, well, now that we know this, then what?
Yeah. You see, what that says to me is, okay, if we are energy and the universe is energy, then we have a way of communicating with that universe. We're connected. And it means that if there's a situation that we want to deal with, then we have potential outcomes from that situation. Right? We choose the outcome that we want.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the other outcomes don't exist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing stopping us from having gone through this particular door and then going along that path and deciding we don't like that path and stepping back onto the other one. Reactivating the alternative result.
Yeah, because that choice point happens probably a billion times a day, and it's infinite. Couldn't even compute it. So I'm just thinking, there's probably a version out there of me that has a 6-pack, and I'm really jealous now.
Yeah. Or there's a version out there that's got a 1-pack and thinking, why did I get this?
That's probably me. So going back then to what we were talking about with, like, not the alcoholics, I say that in not a negative way, because the reality is the right reality for them at the time, but it's just not serving them well.
It's not serving them well, yeah.
So,
but the unconscious thinks it is.
Yes.
The unconscious thinks it's better than going back and trying to deal with what it's got hidden away. Going back to what I was saying about the lady with the alcoholic.
Yes.
Yeah. And I couldn't get back past fear, back past the age of 9.
Yeah.
When I eventually did get the unconscious to become compliant and take us back, what actually came out, and the interesting thing about this was when she gave me her life story, she had told me about this sweetie jar that she had in her bedroom. You remember the old style tall sweetie jars you get in the old style sweet shops? She had one of those, and she said it was always full of money. But that was it. When I got the unconscious to cough up the information, the problem had been that she was being sexually abused from about 7.5 onwards. And the sweetie jar, the money that was in the sweetie jar was hush money. As soon as that came out, all of the connections with that, and that being the trigger for her thought processes that led to her becoming an alcoholic, and the sort of self-loathing and everything that had been in there, that led to this sort of led to the vindictiveness and all of that, it all just disappeared. It was all nullified.
Because there's that clarity, and I think it's difficult for people to realize that or understand that. They're probably thinking, well, surely it's not. But obviously they have to go through the work and do that, but surely it's not just that simple. But
it's not that simple, but to your unconscious it is.
And that's the key.
Because it knows all of the connections.
And it's gone, okay, that's not the right response.
Yeah.
So for people that are, obviously we can't say similar situations because everybody's trigger points and everybody's version of reality is different. But for people that are going through these things and they are interested in learning more about NLP, what would you be advised to be the first steps?
Work out why. Work out what it is you want to achieve. Because if you don't know why you want to change things, then there's no point in trying to.
It's almost like an acceptance, because they gotta want change to happen, and then the why of
the why is the reason for the want.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So you work out why. Once you understand why, that generates a want, and the want will lead you into seeking the help.
Fantastic. And what are you looking forward? Well, I would say looking forward to, but how do you see NLP gaining more traction in this country?
I would love to see NLP in schools. Because a lot of the scarring that I've encountered with clients starts in schools.
Yes.
You know, bullying and all of that stuff. And being the bully, that leads to scarring as well. So, you know, a lot of this stuff, if they started using some of the NLP techniques, started understanding what's going on better, they could stop a lot of it.
That's fantastic. And if people are interested in working with you, what's the best way to perhaps contact you? Is it the website or LinkedIn?
It is the website, but currently the website is down because I've had a bit of a challenge with my ISP.
No problem.
So it'll be back up within the next few weeks.
Fantastic.
At the moment, there's just a business card that doesn't even mention NLP, which is weird.
Oh, but really do appreciate you coming today. We could talk for hours on this, and I know that you've got to be somewhere later on, so we'll come to a close with that today.
Okay.
But that is
the one thing I'd like to put as a final point, though.
Yeah.
It's not a panacea for everything. Okay. Just because NLP has a series of tools, you know, I joke about having a tool set for getting rid of all the crap in your head.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it will deal with everything. It's rather like saying, you know, aspirin cures everything. No, it doesn't.
No. And it's nice to actually hear that, because sometimes when people get in not so much enthralled in a methodology or a practitioner or something, that sometimes they overemphasize its capability, and it's nice to actually go, yes, it's fantastic and it will help you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everyone.
No. You've got to allow it to work for you.
And that's where wanting the change and the why really plays a part. So for them to start there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry.
It's been a pleasure.
Amazing.
Thanks, Byron.
No, brilliant. That's been really good.
Okay.
There we are. We're done.
We're done.
That's it, buddy. That was really good. The only problem is, so I got to find a different way with this sofa, because it's an L-shaped sofa. It's a bit nightmare, and now my hip
same
it's just gone. It's just gone. It's like I'm moving out now slowly, and I'm like, don't kick something. And I'm going off to walk around Nash Point.